Right. Let's take a look at the XY. Ooh. Yeah, pretty boring day today, to be honest. Yesterday, the plan was to see if we can confirm or if we can turn bearish here actually, but we ended up having a bullish daily closure. But again, we are still respecting the opening gap. Alright, so even the fourth time now where we swept this daily week high, we again most likely won't be able to close above this opening gap. Head of New York session actually looked quite decent, but then ahead of news, price just pumped through that opening gap and the inverse one. Initially, I wanted to watch if we can get anything ahead of news because we consolidate at that gap here. Also in the H1, we did close below this opening gap, but obviously it's a daily opening gap. So for it to be high probability, we also need a daily closure. In this case, we only got the H1 closure, which also we got this weird move at daily open out of Asia session, and then at Asia open we closed below the opening gap. And then today ahead of New York session, we retraced. So the plan was for me in New York session to look at if we can drop then lower or get a lower time frame change in order flow to confirm this lower sell, right? That's also why I did not blindly long euro, because again, remember the entry logic I showed you. If we confirm, or if you want to look for the lower sell to form here, and we're still bullish overall on the higher time frames, then you want to wait for a lower time frame confirmation to let the lower sell confirm, and then we can look for shorts. And in this case, again, you can see how simply by waiting for a reaction after sweeping this high on the M5 or the M15. In this case, we use the M15. Would have saved you from taking here a loss by blindly shorting this low here. Also, from the risk to reward perspective, it wouldn't make much sense to try to swoop short here, this high for example, because if you short this high, let's say, there would be invalidation, right? Invalidation would be at least here, right? Because there's no strong high above us. And then your major TP would be this low, you would barely get 1R. So simply from that point of view, I wouldn't be interested to short here anything without a lower time frame setup, which would get at least 2R into this low. But yeah, then ahead of New York session, as mentioned, we already pumped up. Then we also got a closure above. And once we obviously closed above on the H1, the bias flipped again to bullish, so its price closed back above the opening gap we formed today, also back above the Monday opening gap. And then the bias for me was to expect price to run again above the previous day's highs, this one and potentially this one as well. But I wasn't really any setup on euro or pound. The only one which was on UCAD, but I didn't get a fill there. I was also talk about the UCAD setup in a bit. But yeah, you can see here on in euro as well, it looked great out of New York session. This H4 imbalance, which we inverted, same here at the first H4 candle today. And then we retraced in London into the key level, and you can see we consolidated beautifully on that H4 investor value gap. And I want to see pretty much in New York session to run the low here and then give me like a lower time frame change in order flow and then long into this high. Also, we had the London high intact, Asia highs intact, so this would also have aligned with the New York reversal profile. But then obviously once we got this H1 closure ahead of news, the bias or the key level was lost, and the bias for me changed as well to those lows. Then at the same time, there wasn't any setup anymore, which would have justified, or which would have given me a decent risk reward until those lows. You can see we expand already, and then you obviously don't get a retracement here, besides this one. But again, if you short this here, you could have obviously used this M5 sweep here and then entered on this closure here, this candle. But again, then you have on the M15, a weak high being engineered, and you short already in a discount of that overall range here. So yeah, nothing really for me. It was decent on euro or pound. Pound the same thing here. We checked previous day's high, chopped off lower, and then also once the XY closed above the opening gap on the H1, we already also traded here below those lows or close to those lows. Yeah, the only pair which looked decent was still UCAD, because UCAD did not see that large expansion. But yeah, then on UCAD, I wanted to buy below this low here, but price, yeah, didn't make it to this weak low and expand already higher into the first target, this one here. And then, at this point, you obviously have missed the trade. Now, I could have also longed on the M15. You can see here, we got this OB here, which is inside the breaker. So the reason why we did not take out this low or trade in the M15 imbalance was because we had this OB on top of the breaker, right? And if we have that, it can still easily sweep this low, right? Because it's a weak low, but it can also use then this pushing block sometimes to expand higher. But I was like, okay, either I get a fill here or I don't trade this at all, because if I long here, my validation would still be the New York lows. And then again, if I look to the target to here, I would get 1.2 R to this high, 1.6 R. So you can see here, then the risk reward would be for 2 R would be, I would need to see price running far above this high. And then I was okay, either price runs this low and gives me a fill here. So I already get my 2 R here. And you can see, if I would have gotten a fill here, I would have hit my TP at 2 R, my first TP. But even if I would have longed here, my trade would have been now in break even, and I wouldn't have made money anyways. So in this case, it doesn't really make a big difference if I took the trade here or missed this trade here, because the outcome would have been the same eventually. Since you see here for 2R, once DXY swept the previous day's high, you obviously have to go break even, and you can see here I would have gotten them stopped out break even. So in this case, not even too mad about missing that setup. So could have avoided a break even. Are there any questions regarding today's price action before we talk about tomorrow's plans? Yeah, no, DXY, it's still pretty much the same situation. Price action kind of reminds me of UCAD for like 2 weeks ago, right here. Maybe this exact same situation. The first time we had here price forming a bearish key level, right? If you remember, guys, we run the lows, and then again we took out the highs for more time, and then the next day we formed this low risk sell. This time the low risk sell confirmed. Here the low risk sell failed. And DXY, it's pretty much the same right now. We had yesterday or today, we could have printed the low risk sell here already, but price failed to print it here and just went for the high instead again. And now again, we failed to close above. We took out the high and rejected again, as already showed on the daily chart. Literally just been consolidating below this daily gap here in the past few days. As long as we don't get a closure above, as mentioned, I'm still, considering this as level for continuation. But also, as mentioned, we can't trade our expectations if price is not reflecting what we expect to happen, right? Meaning if price is just consolidating and not willing to break lower from this range here, then you also obviously can short this. And for me to be bullish, like short-term bullish into those highs, um, I would have flipped my bias to this high if you would have been able today to close above this high here, or at least above the daily opening gap. But as you can see, we took out the high, rejected again, and also again are about to close inside this opening gap. And tomorrow we got no news as well. It's a Friday, so we will see how much volatility we will get. On the H4, you can see as well we got this bullish imbalance here, which we are now retracing into. So we're still bullish on the H4 and on the H1 as well, obviously. Yeah, I will see tomorrow how we trade, if there will be anything interesting. But the plan is pretty much the same as yesterday. If we can displace lower here, and then, have a lower time frame, double confirmation, for example, before the H1 turns bearish or the H4, there will be one opportunity, like something like that, where we drop lower on the high, something like that. I would go short here. Right? There will be one way of shorting this. But again, we have to see how much volatility we will get tomorrow without news on Friday. Euro, we did take out not all of those equal lows, which I already wanted to see getting taken out here on Tuesday, but we only swept the Monday low and then reversed. So at least those lows are now taken, which is definitely a good sign. So will be interesting now if we can now finally attack those highs here. This trend line liquidity we've built up in the last few days. Let's see here, this entire trend line. Now, as we have swept all of those lows as well, although they were SMT lows, but now they are gone, which is definitely good to see. Also, for now, you can see quite a decent reaction, but obviously, we have noticed bearish dealing range. And just because we retrace, doesn't mean we will immediately reverse. We've also retraced here on that move and still, went then lower again. So we still need, more confirmation here before we can anticipate a run of those highs again here. But again, same as on DXY here. How I would approach Euro tomorrow is same as on DXY. If you can, grind higher here, invert this imbalance here, and we have this one here as well. And if we get like and if you can close above this now, then use this or respect the inverse value to trade higher, and then form like a lower time frame double confirmation out of this inverse value gap. This, and then we have like that propulsion block, for example, forming here. Then I would think to long this tomorrow if that's the case. Yeah, pound again. Able to take out the Tuesday lows, so we do have here potential SMT between Euro, DXY, and pound at that low. Again, we did close above this swing low, which is also a good sign for bullishness. If you would have closed on the daily below this low, that wouldn't have been a good sign for bullishness, since we then closed below an old low, which is more indicative of continuation. But we again saved the daily closure and retraced this entire downside today. which is definitely not a bad sign for bullishness. On the H4, we got now this massive fair value gap. That's going to be pretty much the key element to see how price will trade here. If we can get above this one, then we obviously have all of those highs which price can run above. And I also do think if we get that move, it will be like quite an aggressive move without like big retracements, because we got all of that low resistance build up and swept this high once, now again with the S&T here. And I do think if we, get that bullish displacement out of here now, then I do think we will get quite an aggressive up move above those highs here. Question is, if tomorrow on Friday without news, that's likely. We will see. If not, then next week we will keep an eye on that, depending on how the weekly is closing. Euro pound is still in that same range, so I'm not really watching Euro pound for relative strength, just going with what looks cleaner, and most of times that's Euro. UCAD actually looks now quite decent. Like if DXY can now also turn bearish here, so it's trading in sync with UCAD, then this looks really good for a Monday range play. Right? We have S&T now at those highs, DXY. On the H1, we close below this OB and the bullish value gap, so we have a breaker here, and the breaker is lining up with the Monday range high. So UCAD is definitely now looking interesting again for lower if DXY finally behaves. So what I'll be watching tomorrow obviously depends what DXY is doing. If DXY is, heavily bullish, then obviously I won't short UCAD. But if DXY also can trade bearish tomorrow, then I'll be looking for, now again, same thing here. If we can print here the lower sell into then the Monday range lows. And again, you don't want to turn a sweep short this lower sell, like some of you did on Euro today, the Euro longs. We got the breaker here now, which lines up with the Monday range high. So I don't want to see price to retrace above this again. Also, this is a BPR here now, right? It's a balanced price range. So if we can like engineer now a week high, then we can run this week high tomorrow, and then get that lower time frame confirmation. Exactly the same setup as here. Do you see the pattern now? Do you understand what I mean? That move, only short once we break down. Don't short blindly in that up move. Because everyone recognized the same pattern here. Right? And pretty much that's the same I'm watching for tomorrow. And retrace the breaker here, lining up the Monday range high, and then if we get lower time frame displacement of that breaker, then I would be looking to short this. The first target would be those lows here, which are at the Monday mid range. Then the next target would be the Monday range lows down here. Those two objectives then. Monday low would be quite a stretch for Friday with no news. But that low could be a minimum target, a low hanging fruit. Also, that's the range lows of that range here, right? We have the Monday range. Then within the Monday range, we got this hourly range. This one here. We have seen deviation of the range high. Got this range low here. So we can expect price to trade at least into that low. Yeah, we also got cat news for tomorrow. I almost forgot. True. That would be also a nice confluence. Then, if we have cat news, then we also could potentially trade all the way into that low, since we have obviously news on this pair. Definitely UCAT is tomorrow on my watch list. And then, as discussed, Euro and Pound potentially. All depends on what DXY is doing. If we finally can turn bearish, or if we just keep chopping around in that range from the last few days. That only hears news and they already go crazy. Gold doesn't look too bad, but I just don't feel like watching that anymore. This pair is just like the amount of time I've been spending with watching this pair, and it's absolutely doing nothing. um, yeah, we run this low. Dealing range, we engineer weak low, run the dealing range high. Take out now the weak low into the inverse value gap. Close above this down close candle, which took out the low. So we have here an OB now. So if gold would behave normally, you would expect price to trade from this OB back into the Monday range highs. At least that high here. Imbalance here, so you should get like, like that. That would be nice. And I got too much PTSD from gold in the last 2 weeks. But Chip, I will watch it tomorrow. Didn't the lowest SPY for Euro already print yesterday? Depends on what time frame you view, right? The H1, the lowest SPY would have been this here, right? Because that's the reversal. Reversal, then we expand, retracement, then on the first retracement, that's the lowest SPY. If you view the M15, for example, you could be saying, okay, on the M15, we have the reversal here, then the lowest SPY here, and we aim for those highs. But again, that's the M15 market maker buy model. Also, we got this high here. But on the H1, that's obviously not the lowest SPY. That's the H1 reversal. So you gotta be aware of what time frame you executing on the trade and what time frame your analysis is based on, right? You can mix lower time frame low risk buy with then a higher time frame low risk buy. That's not how it works. What the reversal is after we took liquidity. Yeah, the reversal forms after we take liquidity. It's not a reversal. This is the reversal. This is just the price consolidating, and that's where we in reversal displays lower. Then first retracement, that's the lowest sell. say price would have respected this imbalance, the gap here, and the inverse gap on the H1 would have sold off from here, like swept this high again, and then sold off. Then this would confirm the low risk sell. And then we had here distribution, and we got the target stone here. Um, yes, you're right, David. You could have turtle soup bought that low, but again, I told you on the XY, the the first target would have been this high here, right? And the invalidation would have been down here. Now, if you wanna turtle soup buy this low because you expect price to continue here, I guess you bought this low, then your stop would be at least like in the middle of that wick here. This wick, the H4, you can see on the H4, at least here. And then if that's your main target for an intraday trade, then you would get 1R for that high. And for 2R, it will go all the way to this high. But you could have TS bought this low. It's not a bad trade. But simply since in this case for me, for my liking, the risk reward to buy this low here with stops here. If this is my main target, the first main target here, the previous day's high, and it only gives me like 1R, then it's just not worth it for me. If you took this trade and end up being a loss, don't be too mad about yourself because it's not a bad trade. The logic is right. It just happened to be that the bias was wrong today, and price, you know, even we closed above this imbalance, you can see we also consolidated, but then price just turned bearish again. Right? We still got those equal lows here, so you could argue, okay, this was just a manipulation above those highs into the OB here. Then price went for those lows. But again, since price, closed above those highs with this placement, and we left behind here this bullish imbalance, which is the BPR here then, there's also nothing wrong with having a bullish bias, right? Your target was towards the previous week's high. Yeah, it would have been a valid trade if you wanna take that trade and hold it for like multiple days. Then yes, it's a valid setup. I'm not saying it's a bad setup. It's just a setup which for me just doesn't make the cut. It's like 7 out of 10, and I told you I only take trades which for me are like 8 out of 10. The XY, we also only closed on the H1 below this daily gap, right? So you get this H1 OB here still, which I did expect to fail if we also close below the opening gap. But in this case, this H1 high probability OB with the strong low we trade into ended up sending price all the way back into the previous day's highs. Any remaining questions for today? That's a great example of how you can refine your system, right? Now, for example, if you took a loss here, you can say, okay, I do know turtle soup buying a low risk buy is always risky, or riskier than if the low risk buy is already confirmed, and then looking for turtle soup entries. That's something you could note down now and could, in the future, when a similar setup appears and you have a low risk buy or low risk sell forming, and you think about turtle soup or buying or selling that low, which or high, which forms low risk buy or sell, then the next time remind yourself and say, okay, this time either go again and see, okay, if it works out this time, so you do it multiple times. And if you notice that multiple times price stops you out more often than you win, then that's something you could add to your system. Okay, I won't turtle soup buy or sell turtles low risk buy or sells anymore. I will only trade them with a lower type of confirmation. And that's how you can find, for example, rules which can help you to refine your system. But you obviously can make those decisions now based off one trade, because one trade is not statistically relevant. You need a larger sample size. But if you notice that over like 10 setups, which are that framework where you have a low risk buy, a low risk sell, and they always a turtle soup, not like a confirmation with lower time frames, and you notice over that larger sample size that you more often than not have losing trades, or that you net negative on those trade setups, then you could simply okay, now I have data backing my idea already, and then you can say in future I won't turtle soup buy those anymore, and I will only take low risk buy entries if they are confirmed in lower time frames. I would say I only take those low risk buy turtle soup entries if the EV of that trade is really high. What is the EV? The EV is pretty much your risk reward multiplied by the win rate, right? So how likely that trade is going to be a win. For example, if you say, okay, for example, now tomorrow we go higher now, invert the share value gap, and we engineer low above the share value gap, and then you say, okay, I will turtle soup buy this low again. But you say, okay, I do know it's the same setup as here today, but because, for example, in this case, if I have min validation here, I buy this low here, I do get like, I don't know, a 5R trade if this is a low and price runs all the way back to this high. Just okay, even though I know this is quite unlikely to happen, or it's more risky than I usually would trade, but in this case I would get a 5R trade, meaning your EV becomes higher because you have high risk reward multiplied by obviously lower win rate, but because the risk reward is much higher, meaning the overall result, the EV will increase as well. It's okay, I will take this trade, and I'm aware of that risk, but I do know because it has a high risk reward potentially, I will still take the trade. But again, today there was not a high EV because the risk reward of that turtle soup was 2R for the same target pretty much. Meaning in this case you get a normal risk reward with a lower win rate, meaning the EV of that trade is not good. But yeah, those are more advanced risk management strategies. But most of you should not lose sleep about those things. That's something for later on. Um, can you check pound yen? For me, low probability immediately. Price took out this high, as of Peter high, retraced back into this bullish value gap. So that's low probability, right? That's trading conditions 101. If price trades takes out a higher time frame target. We still got this high here. Oh no, we actually did that take out as well, I think. Yeah, took it out as well. Yeah, that's for me a low probability filter, right? If price takes out a higher time frame objective, fails to close above, then is retracing back into the dealing range, that's not something I will trade. But yeah, that will conclude today's stream. Talk to you all again. Maybe I will do tomorrow a review stream if I find some time. Otherwise, next stream will be as always on Sunday for the weekly outlook and Q&A stream.